Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Again, it's a joy to have you all here on a sunny spring morning. We got snowed out, or sort of virtually snowed out the last time. And we're so grateful to Park Street Church for hosting us here. And we look forward to having a good program for you this morning. So, because we're running a little behind, like I said, we're going to start right out the gate with Pro-Family Senator, newly elected from the Worcester Middlesex District. Special election back in December. Senator Dean Tran is here to speak to you this morning. First of the legislators to come and speak to us here. If you can join me on the stage, let's give them a warm round of applause.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dean Tran. I was elected to the state senate in December of 2017. I was the first Vietnamese American to be elected to the Massachusetts state legislature. The first minority to be elected to the state senate for my district, and also the first Asian-born American to be elected to the state senate. So I'm very proud of that fact. I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to pave the path for others to follow. I wasn't born here, so any hope of me running for president is down the drain. I was born in Vietnam, 1975. I left at the age of 2. My father served in the army for 25 years, fighting communism and trying to achieve freedom. And of course, we know what happened to the war. We lost. And since my father served so long in the army, he had to leave the country. If he had not left the country, he would have been caught and put into, quote-unquote, the re-education camp. So he and my mom, who were big, small business owners back in the country, saved every penny, put 5 of my siblings and myself onto a little boat, and we drifted. You know, the only things that I can remember being so young back then, and I still, you know, I cannot recall some of the things that happened, but you know, being that young, you still have the sense of smell. And once in a while, I can smell that mixture of salt water and fumes from the old engine, boat engine. So things like that I can still recollect. Then we spent another 2 years in a refugee camp. Then 1980, we were fortunate enough to be sponsored by a Catholic priest in Clinton, Massachusetts. Clinton became my first real home because I never had a real first home before that. Being born in a communist country, spent 2 years there, and then another 2 years in a refugee camp. I was very, very grateful to be sponsored and to arrive to a country where freedom is the only thing that my family cared about. I spent 6 years in Clinton, Massachusetts, and then relocated to Fitchburg, Massachusetts in 1986. Went through a lot of things, overcame a lot of racism, discrimination, and prejudice to get to where I am. In 2006, I decided to run for City Council at large in the city of Fitchburg, becoming the first person of color to be elected in that city. That city, when I was elected, the city was about 236 years old. So becoming the first person of color elected in that city was another accomplishment. Then, of course, we all know last year during the special election came upon us. We saw that opportunity. State Senator Flanagan was appointed to the Cannabis Commission, making the seat open. That seat has been held by a Republican since 1980. There hasn't been a Republican elected to the state level for my city, Fitchburg, in over 80 years. So on December 5th, 2017, we won the election. nothing for the people. So my message resonated with the people in my district. They looked at the record that I had in the city of Fitchburg. I served the people, I worked for the people, and never put anything before the people. So they looked at their record, and they said, okay, let's give them a chance. Bring them up to the State House. And I can tell you one thing, the last 3 months, that's all I've been doing, is serving the people. I have accomplished everything that I set out to accomplish. In 3 months, all the promises I made during my election, I achieved them in 3 months. We just published our 100 days, 100 days of my term, and it was very well received by everybody. So from now to this November election, we're just going to focus on other things, making my records stronger, making sure that I stand up to my conviction and my beliefs, and vote accordingly. Vote what the people want me to vote for, not what special interests want me to vote for. So we have a very important election coming up in November 6th of this year. My seat is up for re-election, and of course all the seats are for re-election. But we need to hold on to the seats that we have now. In the state Senate, there are 38 senators right now, and there's only 7 Republican senators. They were very, very happy when I was elected, because coming out good, now we're known as the Magnificent Seven. But I can tell you one thing, serving in the Senate for the past 3 months, there's something lacking, and that something is common sense. A lot of the bills that I believe in, and a lot of people who support me believe in, are not getting passed because there are not a lot of people up in the state legislature who want to inject common sense into their decisions. They are driven by party affiliation, and they are driven by special interest groups and money. So it's very important that we do elect the right people to the state legislature, in the House and in the Senate, because in order to serve the people, in order to work for the people, we really need to exercise common sense. Common sense weighs more than intelligence. Common sense is what is severely lacking, and that is what we're seeing at the State House. So I implore all of you to make sure you come out in November, help people like myself, and help other politicians get re-elected, as well as help new candidates who you believe in, who share the same beliefs and interests and values as you do, get them elected, so we can change the culture up in the State House. Thank you.
Seats up on Beacon Hill, 40 for the Senate and 160 for the House. So keep the math pretty simple. So we're so grateful to have Senator Tran with us this morning. I now want to introduce to you a woman who is sort of new to the pro-family movement in Massachusetts, in the sense that, like you, she was concerned about what's happening at Beacon Hill, particularly concerned about the bathroom bill, the Frenching the bathroom law that we've been talking about. And who here has been to a free lobby day this spring? So a fair number of you, right? So someone's like repetition, but in 2016, this legislature passed a law that really violates the privacy and safety of women and children in public accommodations, specifically bathrooms, locker rooms, showers, homeless shelters, sort of intimate places like that. And 50,000 of you and your fellow citizens, neighbors and friends, signed petitions to repeal that law. We got it on the ballot for this November, so at the same time that Senator Tran's going to be running for re-election along with everyone else, we are going to have the opportunity to vote to repeal the bathroom law and make Massachusetts safe again. And I'm happy to introduce to you this morning the new chair of the Keep Massachusetts Safe Committee that's spearheading this fight, Debbie Dugan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Isn't it a beautiful spring morning? I left Massachusetts last week to go visit my 94-year-old mother in southern Nevada, and I left, and it wasn't very nice in southern Nevada. It wasn't too warm either, and then I was in Colorado, and I woke up this morning here in Massachusetts, and spring has arrived. This many people here this morning. You don't know how it blesses us that you made the effort, so many of you having to get up early in the morning and get on those buses and come in here to Boston and to be a part of this lobby day. Our elected representatives, if they're the minority, they are doing what we want them to do. We need to go and we need to support them. And if they don't agree with us on our views, we need to go and speak to them or their aides and tell them what we think and what we believe. And we need to pray for those people.
Amen.
This ballot initiative, it started out 2 years ago. It was signed into law, as Andrew said, in 2016. And it is in place in Commonwealth. And I just think that most of us sitting here can hardly believe what is going on in our world today. And we have to be involved. We no longer can be at home and be apathetic. We need to use our time, our talent, and our treasure to be involved, to overturn this, to repeal this. And we will say no, that this will not happen in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the land of the Pilgrims, the Patriots, the Founding Fathers, and so many veterans who gave their lives for our freedoms. And anyway, that's what I have to say to you this morning, and I just thank you again for coming today.
Representative Jeff Deal. He is famous, or I guess in some quadrants, infamous for leading one of the most recent repeals that was successful here in Massachusetts to repeal a gas tax, which essentially had no cap. So I hope some of his expertise will rub off on us.
Thanks, sir. Thanks for having me come and speak. Unfortunately, I have to get up to the State House because we're in the middle of budget sessions, and I think Dean Tran was here earlier, may have said the same thing, but it's an exciting time on Beacon Hill because you have a lot of bills going through and you have to make sure you're on top of them all. I just want to come here and first of all say thank you to ReNew Mass Coalition and the groups that have been part of this movement for a long time. Back when I first decided to run for state representative in 2010, it was Chanel Prunier who sat down at a little pizza place with me in the town of Whitman, where I'm from, where I have my 2 daughters, and my wife and I own a small business, and just trying to work to put food on the table, help our kids do the best they can. And I decided to run for office because I thought the decision makers on Beacon Hill weren't exactly representing us the best way they could. And so I got help from the coalition. I got into office in 2010 with a bunch of great people like Sean O'Connell of Jim Lyons of Andover, of course, Mark Lombardo. I mean, just 2010 was a wonderful year for people to come in, and I was so proud. And then the next most important thing was to follow through with your promises. And so, you know, I voted against the transgender bathroom bill because it was the wrong thing to do. I also voted against the unconstitutional buffer zone. You know, and at the same time, I'm also against funding of any organization that provides abortion, and especially those that are taking our children's the body parts and selling them. So these are the things that it's not difficult to represent in Massachusetts. It's not easy to represent in Massachusetts, but it's important because we have to stand together against a lot of what's happening on Beacon Hill that keeps pushing against families. And that's, I read your shirts. What's the back of it say again? Yeah, faith, family, and freedom, right? So I'm an Eagle Scout. I always remember a Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Why is reverent last? Reverent should be right at the beginning, in my opinion, right? Because that's where it all starts. But actually it all starts with you. You were the ones that helped me get into office back in the day, whether it was you or somebody before you that was volunteering. And today you're continuing by doing the work to make sure that legislators know your agenda is equally important, if not more important, to help the families of Massachusetts. So I'm going to do what I can while I'm in office, and I'm so thankful that you're doing what you can to help people like me get in, and then advocate for your beliefs as well. So thank you so much for having me here today.
The bathroom bill, unfortunately, was said to have passed in 2016. We're going to work hard to repeal it at the ballot box this November. But there are two bills that are currently pending up on Beacon Hill. And there's some action is going to have to be taken on them between now and the end of July when the legislative session ends. And they'll have to start all over again in January 2019. But these questions are going to come to a head, so we're going to just go over some of the details that we want you to communicate to your state representatives and state senators. So we'll tweak one thing with power. And the first bill that we'll be talking about, well, first a piece of good news. And when I talk to pastors about getting involved, sometimes they're concerned about not wanting to be political or which moral issues do we deal with, and I point them to James 1:27, which says that we are called to care for the widows and orphans in their distress. And you can't care, I tell them, you can't care for widows if they've been euthanized by assisted suicide. Now the good news is there was an assisted suicide bill that had been pending for really many years. There was a ballot question in 2012 that was narrowly defeated, and there was current legislation on assisted suicide that just a few weeks ago got sent to study, which means it's dead for the session. So that's good news. That bill is still have a brief in there on that issue, and they'll probably bring it back next session. Because when we initially were going to have this lobby day, that bill was still pending, and in the interim, it was sent to study. So that's a win. We thank you for everyone who made phone calls and wrote emails on that issue. The next bill is the sex ed mandate. This is always a difficult bill to talk about in church, but I'll do my best to sort of speak euphemistically. Again, who's heard of the sex ed mandate? Talk a lot about this. There was actually just an article in the Boston Herald, I think yesterday, on this issue. So, a couple of points of clarification on this bill that I want to really stress as you talk to your legislators. Right now, in Massachusetts, under the current law, that this bill would change, but under current law, you, your neighbors, the medical professionals in your community, the teachers and the administrators in your local public schools, the parents, they get to decide what is being taught, to whom, and at what age when it comes to sexual education in our public schools. There's local control. If you're going to teach this stuff in schools, I think the parents should be the ones who have the most input, and the local schools should decide. Local control. That's the current status. What this bill would do is effectively take control out of the local schools and give it to the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, so the state ed department. All right, so first of all, just as a matter of governance and representation, you should ask your state rep and state senator, why do you want to take control, if they support this bill, why would you want to take control from us, your constituents, and give it to a state bureaucracy? There's really no good answer to that question. Now, who's behind this bill? Planned Parenthood. Okay? Because we have to ask, if control is going to be taken from the local school district and given to the state education department, what are they going to be pushing out? What are they going to be mandating? So the bill itself doesn't specifically list what will be taught when and what curriculum. It says the state ed department will be in charge of ensuring compliance. We know what that means, right? So we went to the state ed department's website to find out what curricula they've already approved. And this is one example. It's Planned Parenthood's Get Real curriculum for 7th graders. My sons are about that age, so I looked up the middle school curriculum. And I read through it line by line. Again, I'm trying to think of how to communicate this in a sanctuary, because I respect the sanctuary reverence, right? Here are 2 points that you're going to hear from your legislators if they support this bill. They're going to say, oh, all this bill would do is make sure that it's age appropriate and medically accurate. And in fact, the bill does say that. But the definitions in the bill for age appropriate and for medically accurate are circular and vague. So who gets to define what is age appropriate? At what age do we teach non-procreative sex acts to children? What age? Who decides? Should be the parents, right? Or at least the community of parents together with the schools. Under this bill, it would be the state ed department. Same thing with medically accurate. So again, euphemistically, in the 7th grade curriculum from Planned Parenthood, so we're talking 12, 13-year-old kids, they would be taught how to commit a non-procreative sex act that I guarantee none of you would say is age appropriate. The way I describe it is I used to be a prosecutor in the Marine Corps out in Okinawa. Some Marines would do some crazy stuff. It would go bad and I'd have to prosecute it. A lot of it involved sex, unfortunately. And there's stuff they're teaching our 13-year-old kids that I'd never heard of until I read that curriculum. And I've seen a few things. So it's not age appropriate. There's no safeguards on what's age appropriate. We're effectively letting Planned Parenthood decide what is age appropriate for our children. And then the medically accurate, again, the same 7th grade curriculum teaches kids that if they don't have a prophylactic available, contraceptive available, they can make their own out of saran wrap. Non-microwavable saran. Is that medically accurate? Do we think we can do better than that on our own in our own communities with our own schools? Yes. So that's the pushback you're going to get from legislators who support this bill. If your state rep or state senator supports the bill, they're going to say, hey, this is just making it medically accurate and age appropriate. But we've got examples from Planned Parenthood's Get Real curriculum that it's not, and you should tell them, I as a parent and a member of the community can discern what is age appropriate and medically accurate. I don't need a state bureaucracy telling me. And the state bureaucracy will be in charge. Let me skip ahead, sorry. Get back on all that stuff. All right, here's the language. This is from the bill. Okay? Yeah, go ahead and take a picture of your cell phone if you want. The department, that's the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They will promulgate rules to implement, administer, and ensure compliance. Okay, so they will be dictating what they believe is medically accurate and age appropriate. All right, that language is in the bill. This is Senate Bill 2128. So it's passed the Senate last year, and now it's sort of hopefully languishing in the House. But the House may bring it up for a vote, and then they compare the 2 versions, and then it may go to the governor. We're hoping it stops in the House like it did last session. If you tell your state representatives, hey, we got this in our own communities, thank you. You represent us, protect our rights, don't take our decision authority away, give it to a state bureaucracy. Now, what else does it teach? It also requires age-appropriate information about gender identity and sexual orientation, okay, which are highly controversial issues. And it's going to require that all students, okay, so this is K through 12, all students get age-appropriate information. What is age-appropriate information for kindergartners about gender identity? Ask them. I would ask your state representative, what is age-appropriate information about sexual orientation or gender identity for your kindergarten child or grandchild or neighbor's child. And they better have an answer, because that's what this law would do, would require. Now we know what they're teaching to kids that young. This is the genderbread person. Who's seen the genderbread person before?
Yeah.
All right. This is how they're communicating gender identity. Obviously the young people, that it's on a spectrum, that your biology, your anatomy doesn't really matter, and they say we're anti-science. But they're the ones saying biology and anatomy don't matter. It's just something you're assigned at birth. When the doctor says, congratulations, it's, I'm just making it up, I guess. And what really matters is how you feel internally on the inside, or so how your brain is registered. Again, totally contrary to science and to the medical profession. But this is what's being pushed. Now they've updated this, because here the genderbread person, they do measure biological sex as part of that spectrum. But that couldn't stand, because there's the obvious incongruence of a biological sex and this amorphous gender. So now we have the gender unicorn. And you see there's no biological sex anymore. They've changed the sex assigned at birth, as if the doctor's just making it up, or the parents are just making it up. Biology is not bigotry. If we believe that God created us male and female in His image, the science reflects that. At the chromosomal level, people can get hormones and surgeries, but they cannot change their DNA. So how much of that is age appropriate for kindergarten or first grade or second grade?
Please.
Really for anyone.
Oh, please.
Okay? That's what they're teaching. We also have, some people have seen this movie. Anyone heard of this movie? I know some of you have, students. Okay, this has been played in public schools. It's about a 17-minute video that is aimed at normalizing homosexuality, but it does it in a way that it shows an alternate universe where homosexuality is the norm and heterosexuality is viewed as abnormal, weird, or bad. And so this young girl realizes she likes boys and is really bullied, and the bullying is awful, and it'll be awful regardless of who was done to and why. She's being bullied because she's a hetero or a breeder, it's called a breeder, and they show a female priest who says that Pope Joan says that heterosexuality is evil. So sort of mocking the church. It's a very emotionally manipulative movie, very powerful. And at the end, the girl goes into the bathroom and commits suicide while her two moms bang on the door trying to get in. It's a horrible movie on many levels, and I heard complaints from parents whose daughters saw it were traumatized at the end by the graphic enactment of suicide because of some of the things they've been through. Now the good news is, because the sex ed mandate has not passed yet, 4 local moms whose daughters saw this video were able to go into the school, meet with the principal, and tell them how bad this video was, and get the principal to promise that they would not show it anymore. And one of those moms is with us here this morning. Now, if you would stand up. Because you can go to your local school and have your voice be heard. Trust me, if you go to the state education department meetings, and I've been there, they're not listening. They're not going to listen. So you have to protect your voice to be heard. Yes, sir.
Does the Mass State Education Board have any influence on private schools and charter schools? Or is that
charter schools, yes. Private schools, no, as I understand it. The way the bill is written, it applies to public schools, including charter schools, not to private schools.
What about homeschooling?
Not to homeschools, and I homeschool. So that's good. And if they did, a Homeschool Legal Defense Association would be right at it. I know Mike Donovan, he would be itching for that fight. So just essentially public and charter schools. But there are a lot of children who are in those school systems. And we need to work for them, even if our own children aren't. And just quickly, so they're also teaching this. This is that gender spectrum from the unicorn, same idea. Except this is students filling it out in Beverly Middle School, Beverly, Massachusetts, near where I live. And you've got these happy face rainbow stickers for students to fill out. Are they intersex? What's their gender identity? How do they present gender? How do they express the gender? So we're asking, again, is it age appropriate for middle school students, 12, 13 years old, to be contemplating their sexual expression with happy face stickers? And then they put them on the wall in the hallway names, thank goodness. You probably can't see from here. Some of them have red lettering at the top which says teacher. So the teachers are modeling this for the students, again, at a middle school level. If this law is passed, this type of stuff is going to be happening more and more, and when parents complain, the administration just say, hey, this is what the ed department says we're going to do. Sorry, it's not. Right now, you can hold them accountable. If this law passes, you won't be able to. So even if your state rep or state senator don't agree with you on these moral issues, they've got to agree with you on the issue of local control. There is no excuse for taking this out of the hands of parents in a local community and giving it to state bureaucrats, particularly when they're doing stuff like this. And like I said, it's the ed department that would ensure compliance. All right, so that's what we have on the sex ed mandates. Before I switch to the next topic, which is the counseling ban, do we have any other reps we're waiting for or anything else we need to? Okay, great. So this next bill, we actually are going to be taking this issue to the governor's office around 1 o'clock and keep on schedule. We'll all go over to the State House together. We'll go up to the 3rd floor. We'll have these young men who you may have seen as you're walking in the red t-shirts that we're all wearing now, which was great, by the way. Thank you. They'll help usher us up to the 3rd floor, and we'll be presenting the letters. You should have 3 letters in your activist packet. The first one, I believe, is to the governor. Now, I know immediately there'll be a bunch of you who say, hey, wait a minute, this says March 21st on it. It does. That was the original date. We decided to save a few trees and keep those letters in the packet, so if you want to cross it out with today's date, that's fine. But the content is what's important. That first letter is to the governor, and it's on this issue, counseling ban. So this is a proposed law which would say if you're a licensed mental health professional, you may not give biblical counseling on the issue of sexual orientation or gender identity to a minor, to someone who's under 18. You can only, if someone comes to you, if you have a 15-year-old girl who thinks she's attracted to other girls and is struggling with it, maybe she had some abuse when she was younger, if she wanted to go to a Christian counselor who would give her a biblical understanding of God's design for human sexuality and counsel her, not necessarily change her orientation, but just to change her behavior or expression because she wants to. She wants to live a godly life. She goes to church. She wants to submit herself to God's design. That would be not only illegal for the therapist to do that, to lose their license, it would also be categorized as child abuse under Massachusetts law if this bill is passed. And we put it a little more clearly. If say a 17-year-old girl goes and she is struggling with her gender identity, she thinks maybe she's a man on the inside, she's seen the gender unicorn thrown at her since she was in kindergarten, so this idea is constant. Friends are doing it. Bruce Jenner is now Caitlyn Jenner. She may be struggling with some issues, and she thinks she's a boy, or she's not comfortable in her body as a girl, as a woman. If she goes and gets counseling, and this therapist literally helps her to feel comfortable in her own skin, just through talk there. Just counseling. What's going on in your background? What happened in your family? What's your relationship with your parents? Helps her to feel comfortable in her own skin. That would be child abuse, and the parents would lose the child. DCF would take her and put her in a home that affirmed her gender identity. Now, I used to think that this was, maybe I'm being too crazy with this. Would that really happen? Is that really going to happen? Just scaremongering, right? That's what I was accused of. Well, about a month ago, it happened in Ohio. You had 2 parents, Catholic parents, who had a 17-year-old daughter. The daughter identified as male, and the daughter was really pursuing that. But she was given that diagnosis after going to Cincinnati Children's Hospital because she was depressed and had anxiety. And this is, unfortunately, a tragic, typical pattern. So she's depressed, anxiety, maybe some suicidal ideations. They take her to the hospital. Children's Hospital says it's gender dysphoria. She needs hormones to transition to male. So we're going to take a 17-year-old girl, put her on puberty blockers and pump her full of artificial testosterone, rendering her sterile so she can never have a child, and probably giving her a double elective mastectomy. That's the plan of treatment from the experts in the Children's Hospital. The parents said, no thank you. They took her to some counseling, which consisted of reading the scripture, diving into God's Word. They had her attend a Catholic parochial school where she was dressed in the girl's uniform and addressed by her girl's name. And the Department of Children and Families for Ohio stepped in and took custody away just last month from the parents so that she can now get the hormones to transition. And that's without a law like the one that they want to pass in Massachusetts. And I said, man, I'm surprised it happened in Ohio first. I thought it was going to happen here first. Unfortunately, my counterpart, Aaron Baer, in Ohio, is leading a charge to actually get legislation that would make that type of action by DCF illegal, to protect parents' rights. We're trying to stop the law that would take parents' rights away, because this is Massachusetts. Now, this is one again. Oh, sorry. There's Aaron Baer. Look at that. My counterpart in Ohio. That was my slide deck for the 21st of March. Last week, so a week ago today, you can ask Mike if I'm making this up, I got a phone call from a woman here in Massachusetts, 17-year-old daughter, same fact pattern, 17-year-old daughter, okay, who's been identifying as a male for about 2 years, off and on, to different extents. A lot of depression, suicidal ideations, some bad stuff in her background. It's really tragic and sad. The mom tried to get counseling help at a church, and now the ex-husband, who's the father, the ex-husband is now suing to get custody of the daughter so that he can give her the hormones. And there'll be, I think that the judges, so we're in the hearing already. We're in the process. I got a call. She saw MFI on local cable access. I think Mike was talking about the Ohio case. She heard about that and called us. And so we've now got help from a Christian endocrinologist who is willing to speak about this issue and talk about all the dangers that these type of hormone treatments can cause, and from an attorney with Alliance Defending Freedom, we'll be speaking about it a little bit as well. So we're going to try and help this woman, this mom, protect her daughter, and there'll be more cases like this. And if this law is passed, it's going to be really hard to protect that mom's rights. Because just by taking her to get counseling at the church, she could have committed child abuse. If you've got a credible claim of child abuse, per the statute, in the custody hearing, that's not going to go well for the mom. Yes, Pastor?
Can you say something about the mandatory reporting too? So as a pastor...
Yes, exactly. That's a great point. Right. So when you talk about this bill with your legislators, they'll say two things if they support it. One, they'll say, oh, no, this is just to prevent people from getting electric shock therapy. Because the horror stories that they'll tell about this is that people who identify as gay but are minors, their parents force them to go to these quack doctors, hook them up to electrodes and show them gay porn and zap them. Or give them ice baths. And that would be awful if that's actually happening. There's zero evidence, and I've been doing these hearings for years now, there's no evidence that actually happened here in Massachusetts. Any therapists, any practices, which covers even talk therapy. That's one. I'll do a mandatory report and we'll pause because we'll get some reps here. The mandatory report, so they'll also say, one is just for like shock therapy. Okay, right about just the shock therapy, we'll go for that. Two, they'll say, well, it only affects licensed mental health professionals. It's not going to affect pastors. Well, two things. One, pastors, clergy are mandatory reporters. So if they categorize this as child abuse, if a mom says, Pastor, can you pray with my son? He's getting counseling from a licensed mental health professional for his gender identity confusion. Can you pray for him? Whoa, lady, you just told me you're abusing your child based on Massachusetts law. I'm a mandatory reporter. I now have to report you to the state. So pastors will be dragged into this. And the people who are pushing this law are already saying that they need to make it apply to pastors too. So that's coming. We'll take a pause and bring Representative Jim Lyons, the lion of the State House.
Great being with you this morning. We're over there in the legislature trying to protect you from the people we want to protect you from. I don't mind telling you, every day I go in there, I scratch my head and I'm saying, how do these people do the things that they do? And I think the real thing that I want to talk to you about today is, as I was walking up here, I said, what am I going to talk about today? And I have to talk about the issue that I think drove me to run for the legislature back in 2010 at the young age of 57 years old. And I'm not getting any younger, as my wife reminds me. But the issue that drove me to run for the legislature was the pro-life issue. And several years ago, Bernadette, who was my wife, and I went to a ceremony down at the Cathedral of the Holy Cross, the Catholic Cathedral down. And we were asked to speak about the pro-life issue. And in 1973, I kind of look back to where I was. I was a 19-year-old college student at the conservative college called Brandeis University. For those of you who don't know, Brandeis is one of the most liberal universities in Massachusetts and probably in America. And the decision came down regarding Roe v. Wade. And what they told us back in 1973, and this is what I told the young students that I met that day, was that it's just a blob. It's just a bunch of cells. There isn't any life there. So there's no reason for us not to allow women to take care and make decisions about their bodies. That's what they told us in 1973. Now the reason that was so significant to those folks that I was meeting 2 years ago or 3 years ago was they were showing a video from conception through natural birth. And what we know today is it's not just a bunch of cells. It's not just a blob. It's human life. It is human life. It begins at conception. And we as a society have killed millions upon millions of unborn children. Is it any wonder why we live in a society that shows absolutely no respect for life when that is what we have allowed to happen? They have tried to silence us. Look at those people, they're crazies. I'm the king of the crazies, according to some of those people. But you are the people that have an opportunity to really change it. You have to stand up for life. In Massachusetts general law, the definition of abortion, chapter 112, section 12K, is the willful destruction of an unborn child. That is written in our general laws. When I brought that up to a number of legislators, they thought that I was making it up, and then I showed them the law. How can society expect to protect children when we can't even protect those most exposed among us, the child in the womb? So the message that I want to leave you with today is one very simple message. Life matters, and we have an ultimate responsibility to protect those in the womb. And if we do nothing other than that, then we're doing our job. We have to go out every day and recognize that if we are truly going to change society, we have to make sure people understand everyone needs to be protected. And we have to begin with the child in the womb. So I encourage you to get involved. Talk to your legislators. Talk to them in a very pleasant fashion. Pregnancy care centers are a solution. We offer hope. We offer an alternative. We offer the truth to these people. And the truth is that life begins at conception, and we as a society have to protect all human life. So I have to go back and protect you from these other people that can help. But I really appreciate the passion. I appreciate the fact that you people are out here today. And please, just remember one thing. Don't be afraid. These people cannot stand up against what God has given us. And we have a responsibility to go out and fight for that.
And us. He's got some good fellas, some good teammates up there. But I always know I can call Jim, and he'll help us. So even one person can make a difference. All right, so I want to go back to the counseling ban. I'm throwing a lot at you. There's two things that the state reps or state senators will try and convince you of. One, this is only going to apply to electroshock therapy or things like that. It's not true. Right, if that's what they want, write a bill that talks about electroshock therapy. All it says is any practices, which can mean talk therapy. And even the folks that testified in favor of this bill even mentioned talk therapy, so they're not hiding the ball on that. And two, it is going to rope in really all mandatory orders, pastors, but also teachers. If you as a parent are getting your child help for gender identity confusion, if you don't want to give them hormones, and maybe they don't want hormones, but they just don't feel comfortable in their own body, you get them help from a licensed mental health professional. They tell a friend at school, and the school tells a teacher, guess what? Teachers are mandatory reporters as well. So the teacher calls DCF, because they just had a report of what would be statutorily child abuse if this bill is passed. Now this bill's been passed in California, New Jersey, in Washington State, D.C., so it's spreading. So Rhode Island, Connecticut, thank you, recently, and New Hampshire's been fighting it off the past couple of weeks. I'm talking to my counterpart there, Shannon McGinley, she's trying to stop it. Maine is dealing with it. I think Vermont has it. So this is coming at us, but Massachusetts is the only one, out of all these states that have passed it or are considering it, the only one that actually make it child abuse. The other states make it illegal so that the health professional can't do it. Massachusetts says it is child abuse. So the list of child abuse is, physical violence, sexual abuse, drug usage, child trafficking, neglect, and then therapy would be added to that list. Now, a few facts about transgenderism. This is a hot topic right now. The research shows, and there hasn't been as much research as there really needs to be on this because it's a relatively new phenomenon. The research shows that for most children, if they are affirmed in their own bodies, so given the very type of counseling that this bill will prohibit, the vast majority of them sort of grow out of it. These gender confusion feelings and issues resolve as they go through the natural process of puberty and embrace the body that God gave them. But that's if they are affirmed in their natural body. If they're given hormones and surgeries, it's hard to resolve back into a body that you've essentially destroyed in pursuit of this mental disorder. Now, statistically, in Massachusetts, these are statistics coming from the Williams Institute, which is a left-wing think tank. This is sort of the other side's numbers, and I'm making this up. 0.5% of people in Massachusetts identify as transgender. 1%. Okay, so when you think about all the potential privacy and safety violations in the bathroom bill, those are all done on account of 0.5%, theoretically. Now, what's interesting is that if you break that up by age, you get these disparities. 0.3% of the adult population identifies transgender, but 1.67% of teenagers identify as transgender, which actually backs up the statistics I just showed you, right? Because most of those teenagers are allowed to have those feelings resolved if they're affirmed in the bodies that God gave them. The number drops back down to 0.3. I think it also demonstrates the idea that others have written about called social contagion. That this is what is being pushed in our media, in our schools, in academia right now. This is what the mental health professionals are pushing on families, right? The Catholic family in Ohio that took their daughter who was struggling with depression to the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and she gets diagnosed with gender dysphoria. This is being foisted on young people. If we help them, they can grow out of it. The most of them can. 5.5 times more for teenagers than for adults. That should tell us. Now, the Boston Herald had an article yesterday on a new type of curriculum. It's not mandated yet, I'm sure it will be eventually, but it's pushing LGBT history, English, and health. So I'm not sure what LGBT English is, but that's the new curriculum they have. But in that article, it cited 11% of Massachusetts students identify as LG or B, so lesbian, gay, bisexual. 11%, and almost 3%. So again, almost twice this number. Now they're saying it's almost 3% of students identify as transgender in some way. These numbers just keep growing. A few years ago, it was 0.3% for everybody. Now we're seeing up to 3%, so tenfold increase in our kids. So people ask me, how did we get to this point? What is going on? And so I turn back to an example in the Bible where Jesus was answering a tough question about sex, religion, and politics, kind of all rolled into one. The Pharisees are trying to trap him, asking him about divorce, and he takes him back to the beginning, to Genesis. God created us male and female in his image. Man will leave his mother and father, be joined to his wife, the two shall become one flesh. And what God has brought together, let no man separate. Sort of paraphrasing this up there in the scripture. And I believe what is happening is that we have been systematically unraveling God's design for human sexuality in our culture from the bottom up. Started with no-fault divorce. God says, what he has brought together, let no man break apart. Let no man separate. And we're doing that now with no-fault divorce. We've had that for a couple of generations. Divorce for any reason. Even no-fault divorce is oftentimes unilateral divorce. One party can just say, I'm done, and walk away with no causation. They file in court. The other party has no control. And then more recently, and it started right here in Massachusetts, we said, well, a man can leave his mother and father and be joined to a wife or to another man, or a woman to another woman. We can do what we want to do. And so now what we're seeing is the unraveling of all that's left. God made us male and female, or not. It doesn't matter what our DNA is, what our biology says, what our anatomy consists of. It's about what we want, what we feel on the inside. We're denying the truth of God's creation. And that's how we got to the bathroom law. We had the former president of the state senate, Stan Rosenberg. He said to the Boston Globe, in response to complaints of some women who had suffered from sexual assault and abuse, he said, look, we do not feel safe even sharing a restroom with a man. The man's naked body being forced into our presence, we're not comfortable with that. And the former state senator said, look, women don't need to be concerned about men using the women's locker, because transgender women, so that's anatomical male who identifies as female, Bruce Jenner, transgender women are women. So what he's saying is that a man, if he identifies as a woman, is a woman. And I've seen this repeated from other prominent people in the news. So this is the lie. It is a lie. We have a doctor in our church. That's a lie, right? You can't undo the chromosomes. You can't undo the biology. Men are not women, women are not men. And yet that is what the elites in our culture are saying. And that at the time, that person was one of the 3 or 4 most powerful people in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He is no longer. Into that, just Google it. That's in the Herald as well today, Stan Rosenberg. Google Stan Rosenberg, but it may not be safe for work. Just be careful. So like I said, this was passed in 2016, but it did not end there. We gathered over 50,000 signatures. Many of you helped out with that. A lot of prayer, a lot of hard work. And so now we have the ability to vote in November. To vote no, because the question is, do you approve of the bathroom law? They're going to phrase it a little differently, but that's the question. The answer, for those of us who are concerned about privacy and safety, is no. How many of you have seen this picture? I talk about this. All right, so this is a gentleman who identified as female, and right here in Boston used a women's shelter, went to the women's bathroom in the women's shelter, wouldn't leave. The women's shelter called the police. They hauled him out. Then he sued. Under at the time it was a city ordinance that was identical to the bathroom law. And he sued and won because the court said, well, he has a right to be there. So the state had to pay him $20,000 for his trouble. And no one seems to care about the rights of the actual women who were in that shelter, possibly victims of domestic violence themselves that they have to have a man in that shelter. It's supposed to be a place of safety and shelter. Gender identity as defined by Massachusetts law is this. Again, if you have to use, I know my kids are homeschooled, but they can tell you, if you have to use a term in the definition of the term, it's usually not a good sign. Circular definition. And it's unfortunate because it's easy to exploit. All right? You do not have to have a medical history. You can. You may demonstrate your gender identity through medical history. Doctors know, or consistent uniform search. But you don't have to. It doesn't have to be consistent. It doesn't have to be consistent. And you can show it by any other evidence that it's sincerely held. And this is one of the major points of concern. If a man goes into a woman's locker room, he doesn't have to look like a woman. He doesn't have to have any surgery or hormones or even a psychologist know. All he has to declare is that I am a woman right now. I wasn't yesterday. I may not be tomorrow, but I am right now. I'm going to a woman's locker room. And if anyone tries to stop him, if a dad or a husband tries to stop him, that dad or husband can go to jail. That's how this law works. And what are public accommodations? So obviously bathrooms and shelters like we discussed, and locker rooms, dressing rooms at Macy's or other stores, nursing homes, fitness centers, and even curbs or places like that are women's only. This law specifically addresses those circumstances, and so men who identify as women get to use the women's only fitness centers. What about churches? What about Park Street? So under the law, it doesn't specifically mention churches, and public accommodation law in general does not list churches or houses of worship, but the Attorney General said it did cover churches. And the state bureaucrats said, well, if a church had a secular event open to the general public, then it would be a public accommodation in this law. Now, churches are not businesses, they're not hotels or restaurants. People come to church, they're not customers, right? They're worshipers. It's much more like a family and a home than a storefront. But we can get rid of that and just throw the First Amendment out the window, according to state bureaucrats, if we're hosting a secular event open to the general public. Is this a secular event?